Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast. I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Sara Bischoff of the Unemployment Podcast. Sara, it's awesome to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Super excited to have you on as well. And before we jumped in, I want to read a little bit more about Sara so you can hear about all the awesome things that she's doing. And Sara is the host of the Unemployment Podcast, which she started back in 2020, a few months into quarantine. She is passionate about women and LGBTQ plus owned businesses and loves writing, playing lacrosse, going to concerts, and traveling. Sara, are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, let's do it then. So to kind of kick everything off, I wanted to hear a little bit more on what I call your CEO story. We'll let you get started with all the awesome work that you're doing.
Yeah, so I always saw myself as someone with a lot of ideas, and even in college I was doing a lot of entrepreneurial projects on the side, and I just loved all that, and I was like, someday I just want to do my own thing. And then I didn't know what to do. So I went and got a regular job, and that was all kind of going in that trajectory. But when everything happened in 2020 with COVID, I didn't have that job anymore, hence the unemployment name, the podcast. And so I was like, this is the best opportunity that I'm ever going to get basically right now. I need to just capitalize this and just start doing things and see what happens.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I love, everything that you've been able to kind of do with your podcast. And it's so interesting. I think during the time, everybody's trying to figure out what's happening in the world, what to do, what not to do. And I remember listening to a lot of kind of motivational videos, and some people said there's going to be some really awesome books that are going to be created during this time, and music and podcasts and all those things. So when I saw your podcast and why you started it, it reminded me of that, how sometimes these disruptions create really awesome opportunities for people to do really phenomenal work.
Yeah, absolutely. I went through my phase, but then I definitely tapped into that, almost foresight,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes we don't realize that these disruptions provide some opportunities that we can get kind of stuck in on the things that aren't happening rather than the opportunities that we have. So I wanted to drill down a little bit deeper, hear a little bit more about the podcast and all the awesome work you're doing there. Could you take us through what we can find there and what you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. So I love listening to podcasts myself. I would listen to them at my old job, commuting, and especially in 2020 at the house. I just like to be taken somewhere else. So I created a podcast where I got to connect with guests, and I like to focus specifically on women and LGBTQ plus people, just because I myself identify as both of those. And I really wanted to create a connection between me and whoever it may be, because we weren't getting these connections in COVID and quarantine. So I wanted to just, in a selfish way, do that for myself and talk to these amazing people, and then create a community around this as well. And we focus on just side hustles and businesses. And like I said, I love the entrepreneurship side of everything. So I wanted to highlight more of those people that maybe not everyone was talking about. There's not on the Forbes 30 under 30 list by any means, but it's just people that I thought were really interesting, and I wanted to bring them into a space to then share with more people. And then as the podcast has grown, I added more episodes where I kind of just dive into my own self-discovery, because I really like to examine the self-discovery and the entrepreneurship hand in hand. So if you just want to listen to guests, there's episodes each week just for that. And if you want to get to know me a little more, we dive into that stuff a lot more on the Monday releases. So I'm kind of doing two at one to see which really sticks, or which I really like a lot more. So that's what to expect.
Nice. I definitely appreciate that. And I love that word, connection, because I almost feel, especially during this time, we haven't been able to connect in the same way, but it doesn't mean we haven't been able to connect. So just like you, a lot of times when I started things, I feel like I'm the one that gets the most gifts out of doing the podcast. You get to read really awesome people, hear really phenomenal stories. And I love that you've been able to have that experience, and you've been able to kind of take it further as far as being able to really build those connections, those relationships, and kind of, it sounds try out different things too, to make sure that you get to where you ultimately want to be.
Exactly.
Awesome. So I wanted to ask you now for what I call your secret sauce. And this could be for yourself or the podcast, or a combination of both. But what do you feel kind of sets you apart and makes you unique?
So I'm a very loud person. I don't know if it comes through on the podcast. And I just have like an energy, and I've always had this energy about me that like is that teammate. Like I played lacrosse in college. Like the days that I wasn't at practice, like something was off. Like I've always had an energy that is a little bit contagious. And like I like to make people laugh. I know before we got on, I was like cracking jokes already. And
Yes.
so just me being able to just like focus on bringing that energy out in myself, I think just puts other people in like a more positive and inspired space, whether it's through laughing or just hearing something. And people always say that I have like a very funny and like loud and contagious laugh. And so it's not like the normal secret sauce of like, oh, I'm really good at this skill. It's more of the energy of what I like to bring out in myself and then therefore in other people.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think so many times we don't realize that there is energy that we can bring out in other people, and why it's so I guess important to be able to be aware of that, because a lot of times what we want to see in the world, we don't realize a lot of times starts with ourselves.
Yeah.
So when we start to create that really infectious feeling, the laughter and all those things that we did even before we hopped on the podcast,
Yeah.
it starts to manifest itself in the work and the things that happen in our lives as well too.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like you can go down the rabbit hole of like, oh no, what's going to happen? And you can feel like those emotions from the internet. And so it's like you could also feel the opposite of like, oh my gosh, this is inspiring me to do this, or this person struggled with something that I struggled with. So it's just like I wanted to be a part of the like energy, positive energy, because that's just my natural state too. It's not
Mhm.
ever me like forcing it. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I almost feel, I don't know if you've had this same experience, because we talked about that community piece, that I feel like once you are yourself and you're staying true to yourself, it kind of reminds people that they can be themselves as well too. Because I think so many times there's a copycat kind of mentality that happens on the interwebs and on social media and everywhere, that we sometimes forget who we are, but also even a step further, like staying true to that.
Yeah, exactly. Agree.
Yes, nice. So I appreciate you for doing that. And so I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or a habit that you have, but what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
Okay, so this is definitely going to have to be meditation. I got into meditation in around like 2018, and I was super resistant to it at first, but I actually had a life coach, and it was like someone I saw on the internet, and I was like, what is this? Like, I'm not going to tell anyone about this. Like, I feel like weird about this, but I just signed up for something. I was like, whatever. I had met this life coach who's now like a good friend of mine, and she told me to just like start meditating. And I was like, okay. And I just did it. And the reason why it's like a hack is because it's like you can be afraid. I know I was, to hear your own thoughts.
Mm,
And when you're in meditation, you have to learn how to just hear them and just observe them. And so, even though it was really hard, being able to hear what I was saying then allowed me to go out into the world and just see it through myself, but also see what I wasn't seeing before. And so
mm,
the days that I like lost my meditation practice, which happened a lot in 2020 because there was not as much routine, are just the days I felt like I was riding the roller coaster. And then the days that I take the 5 minutes for myself or the 10 minutes for myself are the days that I'm actually able to think like for myself and then share and create and do all the things I love to do, like the action stuff.
yeah, that's so powerful. I appreciate you for sharing that with us. And I was going to ask you, how did you felt that practice translated, during the chaos of 2020 and all the things that were happening. But it sounds like that was one of the things that kept you a little bit more grounded during that time.
Yeah. And I used to in my bed meditate like before work because I was like, I gotta get myself like hyped up for this. Like,
Mhm.
here we go. And then when I stopped, leaving my house to go to the office, I basically just stopped doing it. And I didn't
Ah,
realize for like a few months that it wasn't enough. I needed to recreate the practice again, even
mm.
though I was just in the house still. And once I realized, I was like, oh, I need to make this like again a priority in 2021, and it's like on my list for 2021 to learn more about it. I'm taking like a class and then continue to just practice it every day, just because I know how much it just is like my medicine. So
Yeah, I love that phrase, like your medicine, because I think so many times we didn't realize the habits that we had in place. And, when that disruption happened, in 2020 for so many of us, we have to like recreate those habits. But I also feel like it helps us to understand what those things are that are most important. I feel like because so much has been like disrupted and changed, we sometimes don't know what are those foundational important things. But I think that it became a lot more aware like during that time.
yeah, exactly.
Nice. So I wanted to ask you now for what I call a CEO nugget. So this could be a word of wisdom or piece of advice. It might be advice you would give yourself or potentially something you might tell on one of your podcasts.
Okay, so I was kind of talking about this last night when I was recording with a guest, and it's simple, but it's like hard to hear. And it's just like do the work yourself. And that little piece of advice is definitely something I would give myself like back when I was in college and thinking I want to be this glamorous like entrepreneur, but I never sat down and posted anything on the Instagram account I made, or I never did a schedule for myself of what days are we going to do podcasts, or what days am I going to write and post something. And I just wanted it to all be at stage 100 when I just needed to
Mhm.
start with step one, which is like, if you want to make a podcast, you just get your headphones. Like I've had these headphones for like 5 years, and record and then post it. So it was like a hard, like wake up call for me to just do the actual work myself. And then, yeah, maybe one day I'm not going to want to edit something myself, or maybe one day I'm going to have someone else help me with something. But unless I can do it myself, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to as well. Like a lot of times, the people that we end up having on our team, whether it be an editor or whatever, sometimes they have that energy that we showcase. So if we're not going to do the work ourselves, then how can we expect somebody else that we bring on? But I also feel like it touches on what you talked about with each of your episodes, where you said something about the journey. And I think so many times we kind of try to or hope to, especially if we're ambitious, zoom over the journey, the actual steps that we take in order to get to wherever that destination is. And it sounds like that's something that is a nugget as well too.
Yeah, it's so much about the journey. I remember when I used to live in California for a
Mhm,
few months. I had an internship, and
mhm,
I was like met this girl at like a yoga studio, and I like was like asking for her number, like all the things, because she had her own business. And I remember I like drove over to like Santa Monica area where her little shop was, and I was like, what would you like do if you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Like I was like 21, she was like 30. And she was like, what do you want to do every single day? And I was like, I don't know. Like I remember she told me this, like, what is every day? What do you want to do? And it was
mhm,
just too big of an idea for me to even understand. I was like, what do you mean? I just go to school, I do lacrosse, like I work, what? Like I couldn't
yeah.
understand it. And then now I can reflect and say, yes, it's the journey. Like it's the daily things we do. It's the ideas that we have that you build to fruition, instead of just like snapping your fingers and there's some like surprise waiting for you when you wake up. Like it's that's the
Yeah.
fun of it.
Yeah, the gift is in the journey and the day-to-day process. But I love, so many times we go through things in life, we don't realize how I always look at experiences like, I don't know why I remember that, but a lot of times we remember it because it's supposed to be something that we call back on, at a later moment in our lives. And it's those experiences that kind of build us into who we are. But was there a moment where you felt like that light switch, that light switch, so to speak, where you started to have and enjoy the journey a lot more?
Um, I think there wasn't a light switch like day,
Hmm.
but it's definitely, I think maybe just a light switch year of 2020 of like,
Right.
I get to redo everything basically.
Mm,
And for the first time in my life, I'm not like a kid. I don't live with my parents. I don't have a 9 to 5 job. I don't have lacrosse practice. Like these are the things that were my journey. And that journey really just like ended in 2020. And it was
mm,
scary for those free fall moments. And then, I just flipped the switch and I just started doing things that I wanted to do. And so it was definitely, I talk about it in some of my episodes, like the 2020 breakdown. Like I am so privileged and I came out so good, but it was still a struggle in my own ways.
yeah, absolutely. Kind of like a phoenix rising, so to
Yeah.
speak. But I think that's something that we all can kind of connect with because, like we talked about the habits and the regular things we did on a regular basis, everybody's experienced some type of disruption in some form, shape, or fashion. Even if you're just going to the grocery store and back, you're doing it probably in a different way. So I think when we realize those things that are no more, have to develop themselves into something new, that gives us the opportunity to kind of redirect and refocus and maybe realign some of the things that we've been doing as well.
Definitely. It was feeling like I was building from the ground up, but now like whatever, almost a year later, it kind of feels like, okay, this is the things I like to do every day. This is what I like to do every week. This is what I want to do in the future when I
Mhm.
can. And let's just keep going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to track down the yoga teacher and let her know you know the
Yeah.
answers to the test now.
I gotta find her on Insta.
Exactly, exactly. Well, Sarah, truly appreciate that. And so now I wanted to ask you my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. And we're hoping to have different quote unquote CEOs on the show. So, Sarah, what does being a CEO mean to you?
Oh my gosh, I don't want to say this sounds so corny, but I know it's going to. It just means like to me, believing in yourself. Like
Mm,
I love having women and LGBTQ plus people on the podcast because sometimes like I don't believe in myself and I know other people don't. And so for me, business isn't about a money sign in my bank account or like a title. It's just the everyday, like we've been talking about this whole episode, and having the confidence. Like I think the CNCO is going to stand for confidence for me. Like it's just
mm.
believing that you can change the world or impact the world in a positive way and in the way that you want to. Um, and you can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that being able to kind of create the community that you've been able to do helps to remind us of that. Because I think when we are going through any frustration or we're not sure if we can do something, sometimes we lack that confidence. And I think once we hear that somebody has been able to do it or we're around people that are able to kind of hype us up, so to speak, that kind of gives us the light that we know we already have inside, but it just lights it up a little bit more and we become aware of it. And then we feel like we can, go and crush those goals and do whatever we need to do.
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
Nice. Well, I definitely appreciate that, Sarah, and I appreciate your time even more. What I wanted to do is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know, and of course, how best they can get hold of you, subscribe to the podcast, and find out about all the awesome things that you're working on.
Amazing. Well, yes, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I feel like we both have such a great energy to bring. So this
Mhm.
was an awesome collab. I am on Instagram at the Unemployment Podcast, just so I can connect with people who want to connect with me. And I post like my guests, so you can scroll through and see, oh, there's this guest I wanted to check out. It's really easy to scroll through and see where they are, what episode. And the podcast is on I go through Anchor, so it's on Spotify and Apple and anywhere that you listen to podcasts. So check me out on all of that. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And we will have the links and information in the show notes as well, too, to make it even easier. I'm a little biased, but I also feel like we both have great energy, and this was definitely a phenomenal podcast. So appreciate you again, and definitely looking forward to future collaborations.
Absolutely. Thank you.